Hello and welcome to Huddersfield Town Extra Time in association with Sportsbroker. I'm very pleased to be joined by Stuart Rayner of the Yorkshire Post and our friend Andy Lawson, our resident Town fan. Stuart, if we start with you, we were joking off air that your match report might have needed some last minute tweaks. That was a breathless encounter that Town came through right at the very death.
Yeah, I mean, it was a real enjoyable, the sort of game you kind of expect on Boxing Day, isn't it? Lots of goals, lots of excitement, lots of intensity. And to be honest, it was one of those match reports where you kind of held off for a bit, because as soon as Gabriel went off, you kind of felt the momentum of the game change.
Yeah.
Blackpool winning 2-1 at that stage. They'd even had a couple of chances to make it 3-1. But I think just everyone in the stadium just sensed the opportunity there. Jordan Rhodes had already come on and had a goal disallowed. And it just felt like everything had changed. And it was just a question of whether Town could A, equalise and B, get the winner. And it turned out they could do both, which was obviously absolutely perfect for the Town fans today.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that it was one of those games where, and it happens sometimes, where you feel like a team gets won, then the second's almost a foregone conclusion. Had we not equalised, then it was almost as if nothing was going to happen. But as soon as we equalised, there was no doubt, I don't think, in anyone in the stadium that third was going to come at some point.
Well, yeah, as Stuart was mentioning there, I think the fact that you could see that we had the goal disallowed from Jordan, so you could see there was momentum building. They were then down to 10 men. Quite often, actually, I feel as a Town fan, when the opposition goes down to 10 men, they're usually quite good at sitting back and we struggle to break them down. So the fact that today we've done that, I feel like Sorba really had an extra spring in his step as well today. So I don't know if he's had some rest days or so over Christmas, but he seemed really on it today. So then, as Stuart says, that goal one, you kind of feel like, well, he really fancies this, Town really fancy this. So yeah, that second goal, I'm not going to say there was a feeling of inevitability, because I'm a Town fan and there can never be a feeling of inevitability, but it was really good that today we did it. A brilliant kind of Boxing Day gift for the fans.
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
Go ahead, Stuart.
I was just going to say both sides sort of get themselves in a certain mindset when it's down to 10 men and what have you. So obviously Blackpool are chucking on defensive substitutes and sitting back. Huddersfield are doing the opposite, throwing on attack. So it's very difficult once it gets to 2-2 for anything to be anything other than a continuation of that defence versus attack. And then it's just a question of whether they can find that extra goal, and two great finishes from Sorba Thomas as well.
Yeah, I feel like we have skipped over the majority of the game and gone right to the pudding. It's almost as if we've left the turkey dinner to one side. The game started with it under a minute. Blackpool went ahead. A brilliant finish from Yates. And then Town went straight back up the other end, and a combination we've seen in the past couple of games, Toffolo to Ward, and Town replied. It was ridiculous how quickly those two goals came about. Stuart, do you think that kind of set the agenda for the rest of the game then? Because it just didn't stop from there on in. Both sides just kind of went, if we push forward, we might get something, and that seemed to have been the agenda for both from there on in.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like when Danny Ward headed that goal in, it was going to be one of those days like there seems to be happening at Manchester City today. You just sometimes get games like that at Boxing Day, don't you? When both teams just go berserk, they give up defending for Christmas and just go for it, sort of thing. And Town did look vulnerable at times defensively, and Gary Medine in particular is a very hard man to mark in the air when you're getting good quality balls into him. It's got to be said. But yeah, it was a game when you just felt there were lots of goals. Both sides played with a real intensity. Huddersfield pressed really intensely, and they were both just really up for it. I mean, probably as much as anything, like the fans, they're probably just grateful to have a game on Boxing Day after everything that's gone on everywhere else.
Yeah, it's interesting what Stuart says in Andy about both teams sort of throwing caution to the window a little bit. It was almost if they said, we need to wake up for the lack of games here across the football pyramid and put on a bit of a display, because that seemed to have been the case across the games that were being played today. There were high scores everywhere, lots of action everywhere, and it was no different here.
Yeah, no, that's true, Raj. It's been a kind of neutrals day, I guess. You are going to be watching other teams' action on the highlights show and things. You want to see goals, you want to see excitement. We've certainly provided that. The games that you've mentioned as well, and Stuart's mentioned, they've brought that too. I think from the Town point of view, I think one thing that seems to be happening at the moment is I get confused sometimes with Town. Are we watching basketball or are we watching football? Because it seems to be kind of like end to end to end to end. But actually, just from the excitement level, there've been so often that people have maybe said, more exciting football would be nice. Well, that's what we've got at the moment. And we all right, I would prefer to have it that we're getting the first goal, but still, so be it. And we're still managing to come out of these games with results. So for me, yeah, I'm chuffed with kind of what we've seen today. If you're a neutral, you'll love it. But as a Town fan, I think you've got to come out of today happy with the majority of what we've seen.
Yeah, Andy makes a great point about the patterns, and Town are a team that seem to fall into patterns, perhaps more than most. That might just be me, because obviously it's a team I pay attention to more than others. But a very similar pattern of play to Bristol City last time out, falling behind very early on, coming behind, the scoreline ending 3-2. The one thing that they did stop today, Stuart, which is a good sign and a good habit to have broken, is they didn't concede late on, which is something that they had been doing previously. Are they good signs for Town? The fact that character is something that's clearly ingrained. The lads are clearly have it in them to come back from these and aren't sort of shying away from any sign of adversity. And that one thing that was a little bit of a concern, even at Bristol when they won and went 3-1 up and conceded late on, that hasn't happened this time around.
Yeah, I mean, I think on top of that, obviously we'll talk about Tom Lee suffered a really bad injury after half an hour, and sometimes that can affect you when that happens to you, mate. It's only natural when you're a human being, but Town seemed to part that quite well. I was really impressed with the way they started the second half in particular. You seem to just put that to one side, which is easier said than done. And maybe another thing in the mindset. I mean, it seems like we had these. Was it 6 out of 8 games when Town scored first and was struggling to win? They seem to have worked it out now. If they concede first, then they're winning. It gets rid of that dilemma about, do we sit on the lead? Do we push for an extra one? It almost makes it, in the same way going down to 10 men makes it a bit simpler for that team in terms of what we have to defend. For Town, we've just got to attack. There's no question of, do we sit back? And it's maybe freed them up a little bit and just put that little bit of confidence into them, so that maybe next time they are in the position of scoring first, they have a bit more belief to go forward. But yeah, the spirit really stood out today, because they could easily have just got it into their head, oh, it's going to be one of those days, it's just not happening for us. But there was a real determination. The substitutions were really positive. Sent out a good message to the crowd, and obviously the crowd responded to that, and everything just fed into each other to create a really positive atmosphere, which is obviously what you need when you're coming up against a team which is just has to be dead set on defending a lead when they're down to 10 men.
Yeah, it's turning into a good period for Town that people perhaps might not have seen coming. It's now 5 games without defeat. It's two games back to back where they've scored 3 times. Andy, that's got to be a good sign in this little period where there aren't as many games being played. Town are going on a bit of a run, putting points on the board where other teams just aren't able to, and they'll have games in hand and a bit of fixture congestion coming up. It's a bit of a strange situation, because I think had you asked Town fans or even perhaps people in the club secretly a few weeks ago, if something happens in the Blackpool camp on Boxing Day and you might get a day off after Christmas, they'd have taken it. But after Bristol, after this game, getting a bit of a roll on that momentum, nobody wants to see a game called off. Nobody wants to see anything like that happening now, because the place is in such good spirits. In the stands, in the dressing room, as we've seen, the way they're bouncing around, it's clearly a good place to be at the moment at Town, and that's not something that we've been able to say for a couple of weeks, I don't think.
Yeah, and I know what you mean, Raj. It's a case of we're going through a decent spell at the moment, so we want this spell basically to keep going. And I suppose to have the kind of form that we're in going into Christmas, because we know that games at Christmas just keep coming and coming and coming. So to actually be a team in form at that point, that's a thing that we've got to really take advantage of. And I actually caught myself earlier. I was talking to my dad and saying about these other teams who maybe aren't playing today and things. It's that it's that cliche, I suppose. It's about having the points in the bag. I would always rather have that than have the games in hand. So the fact that we are able to play and hopefully can continue to do so with everything going on at the moment, and we're in that good form, we can continue hopefully to pick up points. I feel like I know exactly what you're saying, Raj, but I also feel like we're in this position now where we want to just keep going game after game after game. No international breaks for a while, please, football authorities. Let's not have one of them for a while. Thank you.
It's a strange sort of a thing, isn't it, having games in hand and not, isn't it, Stuart, that dynamic of it? Because I think as a football fan, you always look at the fixtures coming up, and especially when you've got them in hand, and you kind of, it's almost like, you know, when you put your lottery ticket on and you're spending it before you've even won it, you're kind of going, oh, well, that's 12 points there and we'll be here if we win these games. And it never works out like that. So it's always better, as Andy says, to just kind of have those results, have those games played, and let the other teams have to work it out for themselves, rather than going through that afterwards and then the inevitable disappointment of not quite living up to your expectations.
Well, I mean, it just shapes the whole season. You know, you just look at the past couple of seasons. It wasn't about playing more games than other people, but Town got themselves a real cushion in the first half of last season, which then allowed them to, you know, survive the injury troubles and the loss of form in the second half of the season.
Yeah.
Previous season, obviously, under Jan Siever into Danny Cowley, the difficult start, then that shapes the whole of the season and it makes it into a struggle. So if you can get ahead of the game, you know, we all know as fans, we're all pessimistic, we're all waiting for things to go wrong. If you've already got that cushion for when things go wrong, life's so much better, isn't it? You know, if you're playing to stay in the playoff positions rather than to scramble out of the relegation zone, it just changes the whole mindset, changes the positivity. And as I say, the positive mindset around this whole ground today, not just the players on the pitch, was what got Town the result. And it's probably what's got them some of the results earlier in the season when they were on a roll. I think to games like at Bramall Lane, where they were, to be fair, comfortably the second best team in that game. But because they had that momentum, because they had that belief, they kept plugging to the end and they scored a late goal, as they did in some of those games. And I say just having that cushion just frames the mindset. And say for too many Town seasons recently, it's been a negative frame. The last couple of seasons have started really well, and it just makes life so much easier.
Yeah, I think that's a really astute point, Stuart, and something I wanted to pick up on you with about mindset, because it might have been the case in the past few games where Town fans might have started looking over the shoulder a little bit at teams coming up behind them. Blackpool today as well, obviously no mugs and only 3 points behind us before the game kicked off, so it could have been level pegging had the game gone their way, which it quite could have easily have on another day. But now Town are sat in 6 that have got these extra points on the board. Is it a case now where people can start looking up the table again rather than back down it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, if they'd lost today, you'd look at the next 3 matches and you think, oh, 3 really difficult away matches if they happen, you know.
Yeah.
But because of the results at Bristol City the other week, followed up by this, you just go into it a lot more positive and you're looking forward to the next game. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? And now it's a case of, as you were saying earlier, I really hope the game goes ahead rather than, oh, you know, we'll take the day off and we'll worry about that at a later point. It just shapes everything when that mindset is positive.
Yeah, Andy, as our resident Town fan and you know, Yorkshireman, we're naturally pessimistic, and we don't often take a sunny disposition or outlook on things. But after these past couple of results and the way the lads are playing, and you know the swagger that seems to be in some of the attacking play, some of the moves we put together are really top class as well. Is there some positivity and some hope now about where the season might go? Because when we went on a similar sort of run, you know, maybe 5-10 games ago, there was this feeling that, oh, we might be able to do something here. That got lost a little bit, not entirely, just a little bit, was a little mini blip. That seems to have been recaptured now. Is, you know, every team is going to have some sort of bad run. We'd seen it at the top 2 in the Championship, who we thought was a foregone conclusion, and Blackburn are proving that's not the case whatsoever. Is this, you know, still an opportunity for Town if they get a bit of a roll on, as we've proven we can do, where there is something to be achieved this season, perhaps?
I try to see myself, Raj, as quite an optimistic person, and it's not always maybe the case, but I try to see myself as an optimistic person. So I do look at Town. I look at this run that we're on, and as you say, like we've had previous runs, and okay, what Town tends to do is maybe have a good run, and then maybe it just falters a little bit. But what I feel now is, if you compare this season to, as Stuart was saying, if you compare it to a couple of seasons ago or so, we are having more of the positive runs. So even when something does maybe falter a little bit, I feel like we have an ability to get ourselves back into that run. But I think that actually comes from quite a few different things. It's a mindset thing, definitely. But I feel like Town have recruited cleverly. So that brings us an ability to look at our defence, back four as it was today at times, and look at them and kind of think, well, they can get us out of anything. So that then gives the midfield a different kind of perspective on things. And that means that the forwards feel a bit free. So do you see what I mean, Raj? It's a case of, I feel like the mentality is different, but I think that comes from the players that are on the pitch that are doing a really good job at the moment. And as the eternal optimist, I'd just like to point out, we're sat around the playoffs, and it's not often that we can say that around this point in the year. So yeah, I'm optimistic, very optimistic.
If we try and have an eye ahead now, Stuart, because the games do come quick and fast. We can't celebrate this one for too long, because Thursday's going to be here before we know it, and we've got to go to the City Ground against Forest. They lost today against a resurgent Borough team away at the Riverside, but as we saw earlier on this season, when they had to change manager and Chris Hughton has left, they beat us 2-0 here, so that's not going to be an easy game. What do you think we can expect from Forest on Thursday?
Well, as you say, they're one of those teams. I mean, there's a couple have started to creep up on Town. Middlesbrough, Forest, Sheffield United, all big clubs with big resources who seem to be getting things right. Yeah. So there's something to be wary of. But as we've sort of said throughout this podcast, we're in Andy's mindset now of this is a positive opportunity to do damage to a rival team, basically.
Yeah.
And I say, again, as Andy says, maybe last season you might be worried about it, saying, well, Tom Lees is going to be missing with concussion. But now with the depth in that squad, you feel like so long as they're not too long-term injuries, you can withstand these losses for a short period of time in a way that was the real problem this time last season. But the squad's so much better constructed. I mean, Levi Colwell's missed this game because of illness, not COVID, just bronchitis. So fingers crossed he might be fit for the game. But even if not, there's other people that can slip in, and it just feels like a whole more solid setup for the introduction of Lee Nichols, of Matty Pearson, of Tom Lees. The framework is there that I think Town are more capable of picking up points when they play badly.
Yeah.
When they actually play well, happy days. You're really in there. So they do feel a lot more solid and much better foundation than they were in.
Yeah, Andy, since Stuart says it's your world and we're just living in it, how do you see this Forest game going? Is it one of those where you've got a bit more renewed optimism about it after having seen that Bristol game, where having not won since, funnily enough, Blackpool away earlier on in the season, we have got that monkey off our shoulder, and we might go ahead and, with a bit more confidence, do something at the City Ground?
I think we have to be like this, Raj. Again, it might just be my personal mindset, but I feel like you have to look at what's kind of in front of you. And in front of us for Thursday's game is a Forest team who, I think I'm right in saying, up until today, have actually been in quite good form. They've had this recent managerial change, but let's be in a season this year where it's about us rather than about what the opposition are like. And we know that we can go into games. Now, like you say, we've proven with the Bristol City game, we've proven with this today, we can go into games, we can game manage, you can kind of work with what we've got. I mean, we've spoken about the solidity of our defence today. Levi Colwell not in, then we see what happens to Tom Lees. Get well soon, by the way, Tom Lees. But you see how we can kind of adapt, and for me that gives me great hope that if a team do something that we're not expecting, we can adapt. I mean, Town played 2 up front at times today. I haven't seen that in an eternity, but to me that shows that we are adaptable. We have got that mindset, that good spirit. So yeah, I go into the game thinking, right, well, Forest have just lost, so that means that their little run is kind of over. We have a little run building. So yeah, let's go into the final game of 2021 with a real positive mindset.
Yeah, I think that's nicely put. Go ahead, Stuart. Sorry,
no, I was just going to add as well, I think for teams like Forest, they're such big clubs, got such big resources, there's a lot of pressure on them to be promotion contenders this season. For Town, if you think about it, really, the last 4 seasons have been relegation battles of one sort or another. So this really is a time to just enjoy it and almost treat it like a free hit. And I think when that pressure's off, you play better football. And I say teams like Middlesbrough, like Sheffield United, like Nottingham Forest, West Bromwich Albion, there'll be real expectation on them and real pressure on them. And whereas if Town can just play with a smile on their face, they can really enjoy that and it can bring the best out of them.
Yeah, Andy made a few nice points about sort of the atmosphere and the adaptability of the side, and rather than picking on certain players as we usually do on the post-match show, but there's plenty that stood out today. Sorba Thomas, Jordan Rhodes when he came on, Scott High was good, Lewis O'Brien as always, Harry Toffolo's coming back into form. I think somebody that deserves a lot of praise and we probably don't highlight enough is the head coach, Carlos Corberán. He's turned around what could have been a slide. He's shown some tactical flexibility that people perhaps had not expected of him. There's a few concerning patterns that we touched on earlier that he's now arrested and stopped and completely turned around Stuart. Is this a season where, still a young head coach and still somebody who's learning his trade to a certain extent, he is showing an ability to get better in himself that should give people a certain amount of, not just pride, but hope as well for where this team is able to go under his stewardship?
Well, not just him, but the fact that the club have allowed him to learn. I think that's the really big thing. I think there were times, you think back to probably March sort of time, he could easily have lost his job at another club. The impatience was building, the results were poor. At clubs like Nottingham Forest, he'd have been gone. It's as simple as that. The club's really given him the opportunity to learn from his mistakes, and he has learned from his mistakes. It was very clear at the start of the season that he needed to address the defensive side. And as we say, there's a much more solid base to that. So, yeah, a huge amount of credit due to him. He is a lot more flexible. He was talking in the press conference then about he might play two more often. Now he's got Danny Ward and Jordan Rhodes playing well. It suddenly opens up possibilities. He can play differently, whether he's got Koroma or Sonani playing off the left and all this sort of thing. Switching between a three at the back and a four at the back. I think he deserves a lot of credit, but also I think the club deserves a lot of credit for not doing the knee-jerk thing that most football clubs would do and just panicking at the first sign of bad results.
I think that's a great sum up of not only today, but the game to come up. And I don't want to take any more of your time this afternoon. So thank you to you both. I'll leave you both to go home and get into your leftover turkey. Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you very much, Stuart. And thanks as always to Sports Broker for sponsoring the show.